session. We're going to get kicked off in just a couple of minutes here. Looks like we have a bunch of folks still coming into the LinkedIn Live session here. We're going to get started in about a minute or so. Stay tuned. Looks like more folks joining us here. Welcome. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Thanks. Okay, well, it's about a minute after. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone. My name is Matt Harrell. I'm with the Clearwave team, and I'll be your moderator today. We're picking up on part two of our three-part series on patients, profits, and practices. If you missed last week's session, in part one, we covered key areas for acquisition costs. But today we're going to talk about revisit those patient acquisition costs, but in the context of patient lifetime value and ultimately the role that patient retention plays in that as well. Just like last time, we're going to keep this to about 15 minutes. Really, the goal is to give you some quick insights and let you get back to your day. So we're going to try really hard to honor that time commitment here. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those into the question or comment box as we go along here today, and we'll do our best to get to a couple of those as time permits at the end. So jumping into today's topic, joining me, I've got two healthcare executives that really both spend a lot of time talking to practice leaders and thinking about how to help them gain more patients and ultimately retain them. So with me, I've got Ryan Evans, VP of Sales at SocialClimb, and Elizabeth Jones, VP of Client Success at Clearwave. If we go to the next slide, we're going to do, as I mentioned before, just a brief recap of what we covered last week as a refresher, then look at that in the context of patient lifetime value, what it is, how to calculate it, and then we'll round out our discussion today talking about the part that retention has to play in that lifetime value calculation. So without further ado, Ryan, Elizabeth, welcome to today's session. Thanks so much for joining me. And Ryan, I believe that you're first up here. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. So I want to start with the first two slides, recapping what John and Kristen talked about last week. So first of all, the constructs of patient acquisition costs, right? There's all of these different channels as a marketer that you're trying to acquire patients from, right? And ultimately the action is obviously to get them into your practice. There's ways in which to do that are more expensive, some that take more time, some that are more cost effective and happen a lot more quickly. Ultimately, we're trying to get our patients to book either online with a self-scheduler or to call into our practice and book an appointment. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, just a quick recap on what goes into the patient acquisition cost. We got a ton of math today. I'm a big fan of the math, but we got a ton of math today for the next few slides. Patient acquisition cost is the total cost of your campaign and your acquisition divided by the number of patients acquired from that campaign. Seems super simple. Like Max said, I'm in sales here at SocialClimb. I have the benefit of talking to every practice to identify their needs, their problems. So does our team. You'd think everyone would think about patient acquisition cost, but it's tough to get there. It's tough to identify what it costs to acquire the patient. A lot of practices start to talk about, hey, we feel really good. We feel like we have a ton of patients, but do you know? Do you know what's converting? Do you know what it's costing you? If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, here's some more of the math. This is what we're going to talk about today. not only is patient acquisition cost super important, but the lifetime patient value is super important, right? Because yeah, they may book an appointment with us and we may make, they may have some value on that first appointment with us, but how many times do we see patients, right? So the lifetime patient value is the average value of the appointment multiplied by the average number of appointments in a year, multiplied by the average number of years they visit your practice. So really simple at the bottom. If the average value of our appointment is $250, they see us 3 times per year on average, and the average number of years that they see us or visit our practice is 2 years, our lifetime patient value is $1,500. It can be challenging for a lot of groups to identify that, right? They may have the average number of appointments, they may have the average number years that a patient sees us, but putting it all together is really what you have to think about. And if you go to the next slide, there's actually the marketing growth multiplier. This is one that rarely do we have conversations about with practices thinking about what is our multiplier. I mean, in simple terms, it's for every dollar we spend, how much do we get in return, right? For every $1, I want to have $3 or more in return. So that would be lifetime patient value divided by your patient acquisition cost. So that equals your marketing growth multiplier. And you can see what we put here as the line is above and below 3 times. That's not to say that if you're at 3 times your multiplier, that everything's gravy. You don't need to do anything else. There's no room for improvement. I don't need to improve my marketing. Really what it's saying is that's where your minimum is. That's where your baseline is, and you want to really be above that. Now, if we're talking about below 3x, let's talk about some other things that we can do to for sure improve that, right? So that's where we have the baseline there. If you go to the next slide, really what we're talking about today is like, what are the ways that I can get above that 3x line? So I know we're going through it very simplistically today, but improving your marketing conversion is one way. You may have a killer message. You may have a really good message or what you think is a really good message, but are you targeting the right audience, right? So you see the middle slide, which says focus marketing efforts on the right audience. That increases your lifetime value. If you know that you're going after and attracting the right patients, or if you need more knee patients and that's what you want to target, and hitting them with the perfect message, that's going to increase your lifetime value. But on the reverse side of that, you may have the right audience, and sometimes you just have the wrong message. And a lot of practices will say, hey, we're going to give up because we're just not converting high. Well, what if that audience is good, but you're just not hitting them with that right message? And then lastly, improving or optimizing your marketing channels, right? So trying to find ways to reduce your patient acquisition cost. There's many different channels that John touched on last week as far as improving your marketing funnel and finding different ways to acquire patients. There are more cost-effective ways that a lot of practices skip, like your online reputation, your brand ads, your search ads, your Google ads. If you can really optimize those channels, you can convert patients at a better price. So without further ado, I'll transfer it over, Elizabeth, to you to continue it.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Now that we understand patient acquisition costs, lifetime patient value, and how to improve those multipliers, which, by the way, I really love all of that math, so thank you very much. It's important to understand how best to engage patients and conversely, how to minimize points of frustration. So while this is certainly true while delivering actual clinical care, it's also true within any kind of patient engagement prior to that clinical care. So patients think about their healthcare needs at all hours of the day. So providers need to be extremely accessible to both new and existing patients at any time. And if they are not, they miss out on a big opportunity to retain existing patients and to grow their practice. And as we all know, patients are busy and they don't want to wait. So if there's an ability to offer them a self-service tool at any part of the check-in experience to move them faster through that process, they will take advantage of that. More and more of the patient population across all ages is accustomed to technology, especially post-COVID. And we shouldn't make assumptions about what will not work based on certain demographics. And we should actually lean into leveraging technology tools that almost all patients use today, their smartphones. And then lastly, millennials, they live in an online world, and we should assume that they assume too that online scheduling is available to them. And if we don't give them those online tools, then there's a big opportunity to miss out on that. So knowing what drives a good patient experience and what to avoid, it's important to put that understanding into practice. So 3 things to think about. One is leverage patient self-service tools such as online scheduling. So this gives your existing patients more flexibility, drives new patients to your practice. Leverage tools where patients can keep updated on the status of their appointments through appointment confirmations and reminders. And not only is it good to remind them about an appointment, it also gives them flexibility to confirm their appointment, reschedule an appointment, or even cancel an appointment. And again, at any time of day, at a time that's convenient for patients. And so really, we want to make this convenient for patients. And then lastly, we want to make sure that when patients do arrive at the office for that clinical care, we want to make sure that we've streamlined that check-in experience and giving them access to self-service tools so that they can do everything that they need to do. Those tools can identify the patient, they can collect the updated information, those tools can accept consents, they can collect payments, and they do that all with the patient driving that experience. So lastly, I just want to speak to how do you increase the value of patients. And so first and foremost, we want to leverage technology for improved operational efficiencies. And we've talked a lot about ways to leverage technology for the patients themselves, but we also want to leverage technology for staff. And so is the staff today, are they rekeying patient information from a clipboard? Are they manually making phone calls to insurance carriers to check eligibility? Are they manually scanning a driver's license card, scanning an insurance card, or processing a credit card directly? There are ways to leverage technology so that your staff is not spending time doing things that they perhaps don't need to do. And if your operational efficiencies are better, then your overall patient costs go down. There's also an opportunity to leverage technology for more streamlined and consistent and targeted messaging. And in that way, you can identify potential services that may otherwise be missed. You can ask particular patients, are you interested in learning more about LASIK? Are you interested in learning more about this other service? And if they say yes, then to Ryan's point, you know exactly who your audience is and how you want to message to them. And you're really focusing your resources in the right way. We have a client, Thomas I, who leveraged those targeted questions and realized over $400,000 in new LASIK revenue. It's huge. And lastly, there's a opportunity to leverage technology for consistent payment collection. Most staff, if you're anything like most staff, and I personally don't like it either, don't like asking for money, don't like asking for payment. So let the technology of the self-service tool take on that task. Give your staff, prevent your staff from having to do that, and also improve your overall collection rates. So there's an opportunity to do that as well. So in general, if you can leverage technology to streamline those operations and identify new service opportunities, take on improved collections processes, you can really improve the overall patient lifetime value. Matt, I'll turn it over back to you for some final comments.
Awesome. Ryan, Elizabeth, thanks for that. I think, Ryan, for your portion of what you shared, I think for those on the call that are really looking to become more metrics driven, what you shared was such important information on how to start thinking about their LTVs, and then ultimately aligning marketing investments accordingly. So I think that's a super important takeaway for those on the call. And then Elizabeth, thinking about that LTV formula that Ryan shared, 2 components of that are really more in the practice and practice administration's control to control, which is how much value do we get from those patients, and then retention, how long do they stay with us? Those are truly force multipliers in that lifetime value calculation. And so I think folks revisiting those last couple of slides are going to be some great key takeaways to increasing that over time. We are right at time. I think we got a couple of questions. If we can maybe squeeze in one or two of those really quickly here. This one, Ryan, I'll direct this your way. This person asks, what are some of the reasons you see for people not calculating their patient acquisition costs? And I might add the LTV in there as
Sure.
well, if there's a difference in those.
Yeah. There's several reasons. I mean, the simplest reason is they've never thought about it, right? Or they don't know how to get there. So I know the math seems simple, but you have to do some things to actually find out your patient acquisition cost. So we talk to a lot of practices who are like, I've never thought about that, right? Because I'm trying to drive leads or things of this nature. But in healthcare, there's also a big challenge of even tracking from a phone call standpoint who's coming through. Elizabeth did a great job of detailing, like, hey, you can crush it at marketing, but if it is not easy for your patient to book an appointment, they're going to go somewhere else, or they're likely to go somewhere else where it is easier. So, there's several reasons for that. They don't know, they haven't thought about it. And then the last one I'll say is there is we're fine. We have the patients we need, so I don't care about the math, right?
Yeah.
And I think eventually everyone gets to a point where they have to start thinking about the math. And even if you're okay today, you never know what tomorrow will bring or next month. And so it's always important to understand it at a minimum, even if you feel like you don't need to improve it.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And, Elizabeth, I'm curious on your perspective here. My sense would be the other piece of this for people maybe not considering some of those metrics is that these folks, practice leaders, are busy. They're pulled in a ton of different directions. And so there's certainly probably other areas of focus pulling their attention. Elizabeth, is that your experience?
That's absolutely true. And I think every practice leader would agree with a lot of these concepts. And part of it is, though, do I have access to the data? Do I know? Can I answer those questions? And do I know how much it costs me today? Do I know how much time my patients are spending checking in today? A lot of the times they don't know what they don't know. And so there's an opportunity to dig deeper on that.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, I think we're about out of time here. But before we adjourn, I just wanted to highlight that we're going to have part 3 of our LinkedIn Live series next week. We've got Memorial Day coming up here. So we're going to convene on next Thursday, June the 1st at noon Eastern for that third session. And it's going to be all about scaling your practice. So, if you are currently find yourself in hyper growth mode, or maybe that's something you aspire to, you're not going to want to miss that session. It's going to be a great one. So again, Ryan, Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks everyone who tuned in live here with us today, and we hope to see you for next week's session. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.